Okay, sir.
Na wabunge wetu wafungue macho, sio kwenda kulala kwa bunge ikiendelea. Umelala nyumbani, umelala kwa gari ukitoka Kakamega ama ukitoka Mombasa ukikuja, umelala kwa hoteli, unafika kwa bunge tena unaanza kudosi. Hiyo ni changa gani wabunge wetu wanakunywa? Utakuwa una dosi nini? You are dosing on the votes of Kenyans. Unalala juu ya, na mimi nataka kamera. Sikubaliwe kukaa katika bunge. KTN, Nation, KBC, Citizen. Those are our 4 radio stations. National radio stations, because they are everywhere. They come everywhere. Siwe katika bunge zikizingatia huyu mbunge analala. Ili tu wananchi wawe chonjo na kura zao. Amesema mambo yote, amesema ni kwa nini tuko pahali ambapo tuko sasa. Ameongea mambo ya umaskini katika nchi yetu. Ameongea vile tunavyostahili tuishi kama nchi iliyo huru. Ameongea umuhimu wa utu, integrity. Ameongea ni kwa nini kanisa lafaa liunge hii katiba mkono. Ameongea vile yeye mwenyewe alitest injustices. Aliona shida zilizokuwako wakati ule. Hii sio katiba ya wanasiasa. Wanasiasa, if they want to undo each other, wangojee 2012. Na nimesema hii mara nyingi. Mawaziri, wabunge, watu ambao wana vyama tofauti, wengine wako Kitui, wengine wako Nairobi, wengine wako wapi, wengine wako wapi. Wanajidanganya. This time they are cheating themselves. Ni lazima nchi hii hiwe na katiba mpya. Mwaka jana Disemba, nikikumbuka vizuri, tarehe 13 naambiwa 13, na nikamwambia hii katiba sio ya zizi wengine ambao nywele nyeupe zimeanza kutoka kwa vichwa. Hii ni katiba ya vijana kama nyinyi. Hii ni katiba ya posterity, na hii ni katiba ya kulinda nchi hii. Na mimi nataka kuhakikishia wanasiasa kitu kimoja, na nataka mnisikie sawa sawa. The constitution, the attainment of constitution of Kenya is a must. It's a non-negotiable. It's a must. Useme no ama ndio, katiba tunapata. Na kama mtakataa na hii katiba ambayo inaungwa mkono na rais na prime minister, wafanyikazi katiba yao iko tayari.
Countries are debt distressed. Ghana is currently going through the restructuring of her debts under the G20 Common Framework, which we all know is a slow process and needs to be stepped up. At the same time, we're suffering from the increasing effects of climate change.
We are doing so at a time when Africa and the world are still facing the effects of multiple crises.
Like many IDA countries, Ethiopia faces unemployment and a skill gap challenge.
The forthcoming 17th replenishment of the ADF should be doubled to 25 billion per replenishment cycle, thereby facilitating greater levels of concessional financing to its 37 low-income member countries, which will also complement IDA.
In light of this crisis, coupled with significant shortfalls in development finance and shrinking fiscal space, what is required in going forward are more concessional resources.
We are working to make IDA more efficient. We are working to make it able to deliver faster by cutting burdensome rules, requirements, and redundancies. We believe a simpler and reimagined IDA can be deployed with more focus to make meaningful impact to advance the fundamental needs, energy access, healthcare availability, realize the agricultural potential of this continent, and build out critical infrastructure and skills in its people.
Okay, back. Those are the African leaders who on Monday called for rich countries to commit record contributions to a low-interest World Bank facility for developing nations that they rely on to help fund their development and combat climate change. Donors will make their cash pledges to the International Development Association, that is either a World Bank institution that offers loans with low interest rates and long tenures. And at the conference, of course, another conference will be held in Japan in December. And African economies are facing, as we had, a deepening development and a debt crisis that threatens our economic stability and urgent climate emergencies that demand immediate and collective actions for our planet's survival. And we want just to focus on that and just tease out some of the issues that were arising from that particular summit in light of that is acting as a segue to that conference in December in Japan. Dr. Hassan Kanenja, what did you pick out from the summit since Monday? And still people are saying, excuse me, I cleared the phlegm there, that we are still going with our pail in hand, seeking for more loans and donations from the Bretton Woods institutions. I don't know what is your reaction, that this is what he will say a pecuniary embarrassment from the African...
the continental level now.
At the continental level? All right, let's just pick it up on that.
Of course, this is the first time IDA, is having, such kind of event, and this time it took place in Nairobi. Well, it's good to place in Nairobi because it raises the profile of Nairobi as a strategic place, that has been hosting a lot of continental events as well as global events. And when talking about economics and development is always good. Managed to bring together private sector, young people, to buy, of course, into the agenda. The trouble I have, though, is not just about extending the begging bowl, to the World Bank, is the Bretton Woods institutions have been critical in helping countries balance their budgets. But I'm yet to find evidence that they've been critical in actually helping countries grow development and advance. Literally, they've managed to keep countries afloat when they're in crisis. And we need to start thinking beyond this, kind of engagements. What is critical is serious investment. And yes, they've been involved in funding certain things with regard to electrification of the continent, and they're still doing that, But these loans come at a cost, and a very high cost. And unless we work out the mechanics in which we can be able to access those loans cheaper, but also there's a system to ensure accountability of the way this money is used, it's not really going to be very helpful. And there's a reason why there's a large global movement against a number of policies of the Bretton Woods institutions. And some countries, pretty much, left it. And because it's massively also, a political tool. Today, countries that can barely afford to pay back IMF money, they're being literally offered tens billions, like Ukraine, without even applying for it, knowing clearly, well, they will not be able to pay. Now, the sentiment from African leadership about advanced economies extending, creating a kitty to extend, cheaper loans, of course, is something that is welcome. But again, it doesn't make us exactly look good, because today, as we speak, our partners, for instance, the EU, they're trying to put together 100 billion Trump-proof support for Ukraine in case he comes to power, still have money. Washington just passed a $95 billion, bill to fund Ukraine. We think Ukraine gets around 61 billion, out of that. This is one that's just being thrown out there for things that in the assessment are important. And so, where are we? If we are truly partners, we need to tell each other the truth, because if you are to put $100 billion investment in Africa, how do you think that is going to look like in the next 5 or 10 years? It's going to be massive. We've thrown in the last maybe 2 years close to 250, 300 billion to Ukraine to support a war machine. I can tell you this, the way things stand out there, not many people are going to gain from that war, you know. And so, how about we are serious and actually be able to put investment where it matters? And the reason I'm saying this, why I say, you know, we don't need to put a lot of our hopes in that, because just this past year, Kenya hosted the, you know, Africa Climate Summit, which was fairly successful. In the Paris agreement, you know, the advanced economies were supposed to, you know, put away together something like 100 billion. You know, how much of that has actually been put out there? And so, while this may make people feel good, as African countries, we need to start looking inside, or the inward. What mechanisms can we be able to build, including even building our own banks that are sufficient enough to fund some of these things, because our countries are not exactly poor. What we've had is poor leadership in terms of trying to make use of our resources. So much so that even Africa's own institutions of resolving conflicts and issues, they're actually funded by our partners from abroad. Small budgets, $200 million, $600 million for the AU. You know, how can you be relying on foreigners for such small monies? And so we need to look inward and see what would be the best way for us to organically grow, so that we, number one, we reduce borrowing, two, we reduce begging, okay, three, we actually start investing, because investment is the only thing that creates real jobs. It's not just loans. If you take a loan to pay a loan, you're not growing. If you take a loan, a concessional loan, for instance, to build something, so to generate opportunity, job, and people pay taxes, it's going to do something. But many a time, we've been borrowing loans to pay loans that are of high interest rates that we cannot even afford. So we, as African countries, we know that IDS, most of its finances and projects are actually on the continent, and that may be a good thing, you know, but it is not exactly the alternative to being able to build our economies organically and ensuring a degree of self-sufficiency and independence, at least from a financial perspective. So going forward, we really need to think long and hard about how can we truly be free if every day we're extending the begging bowl.
Right.
Thanks, Dibal. I like what Hassan is raising, but the sheer coming together of African leaders in a summit in itself gives some level of hope that perhaps we have started to begin to realize that as a continent, and with matters that touch on financing, particularly when we are talking about aid that comes from the Western world, we need to find a way of speaking with one voice. Yes. That has been an important missing dimension in the continent. And friends, if you do not realize that is what the West doesn't want. When the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi made an attempt to bring Africa together and beginning to talk about the African form of World Bank, if I may use that, and also creating reserves, using gold, which we have in plenty in this continent. It didn't live long to see that happen. I'm not saying the death was caused, but your guess is as good as mine. So for me, the sheer coming together is extremely important, and it will be said if this ends up to be just a talking shop, like many other summits that we have had in the continent. Nevertheless, there's very clear demonstration in our Mideast that our countries in the continent have not been capable enough in dealing with what one could generation, demography, the contestations between our traditional life and modernity and all that. Foreign aid has not helped us, leave alone the most important thing about the economic development. I'm a student of Dambisa Moyo, you know, Dead Aid. That the Zimbabwean who wrote this book entitled Dead Aid. Aid is not going to help us develop. It has not done so in the last half century of Africa's independence. And from where I sit looking to the future, you know, I don't foresee that that happening. Things don't move very far away, and I know this because I'm a historian. Things don't move very far away from the patterns of history that we have had. So I think it has come to a time, therefore, for African leaders to stop being long in speeches, but short in actions. Let's deal with this paradox of Africa being the richest continent that is poor. All the minerals are here. All the natural resources are here. Look at the water that we have. We're seeing this as a resource that is going to waste right now in many countries in Africa. Let's begin to ask ourselves important questions that will enable us engage differently with the Bretton Woods institutions and other funding agencies, whether multilateral or bilateral in our continent. And I believe that the time to do that is now. We will be watching very keenly to see the Nairobi resolutions and the agreements that these leaders made. What will become of it? Are they going to face this time round you know, the issues of over-dependence in the West, in the so-called Western consensus, in the direction our development takes?
But what we should ask ourselves, if it's a Daktari, is what is discernibly different with the Africa Climate Summit that we had here? Because this was the sentiments that the West needs to do more, we need the money, we had our own declaration as well. So what is dramatically different from that?
You know, that's why essentially I'm saying that we already have a pattern. I'm waiting for a surprise when we will translate these long speeches into tangible actions that we will do as a united Africa in facing people who have funded us and our projects for a very long time in ways that do not work for us, but in ways that works for them. That is really the elephant in the room in my view. You know, Africa needs to begin to ask itself different questions. We have done the same things over the years, but we are expecting different results. For example, let me give you what I don't like most about Western funding. Just like in the 90s, during the days at the height of structural you know, adjustment programs, we are being told to cut funding to education, to cut funding to healthcare, to increase taxes and all that. And our leaders are taking that literally while they are killing the African economies and literally killing the people, because if you're going to reduce the funds you give to healthcare, the funds you give to education, and many other social services. So what remains in this continent? If there is something that we need to do, for example, here in Kenya, education is increasingly becoming expensive, and that is the only resource that we hang into. You know, anybody who says otherwise, we should resist that with the strongest, you know, if it's words and the strongest energy that we have within ourselves, that we need to invest in proper education that will prepare our people to be global citizens. You know, this idea of us wanting to export laborers, you know, to different parts of the world, is not going to work for us. We want to export skilled people who are going to change the world out there. And we have a lot to learn from Asia. Last night I had an opportunity to have a dinner with young Indian trainee diplomats who are visiting the country. And those are the things we were talking about. India has done differently from us. The sustained promotion of the education system in such a way that it produces citizens who are competent enough, to face the rest of the world very seriously. That's why, every senior executive now in any company in the world that matters is probably Indian. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just look at across the world, from Google to the high-tech companies. That is my dream for Africa, Diba. Yes.
All right, let's hear from Professor Naomi Damba.
Dubal, what my friends Kanenje and Obongi are saying are words that resonate with all of us. Whenever we sit down, we talk about this. Whenever intellectuals get together, we talk about it. Whenever politicians get together, we talk about it. But from what Obongi is saying, it is time that Africa go to diet. We need to go to diet ourselves. We need to speak less words, and we need to be action-oriented and meaningful and purposeful. And why am I saying this to Bal? These are no strange things. We all know the history of aid coming to Africa is not to help Africa. It is a soft power mentality that goes right back to the country which is providing aid. It is not meant to develop our people. And then Africa come together like this ADA and make pronouncement. Wonderful to hear. But when they go back in a corner on a bilateral relationship, it's a different story altogether. And so you accumulate debt on top of debt, whereas the waste at home is incredible. When you look at the kind of cars we drive because we're leaders, V8s. And why are we driving V8 when we can drive a V6 or V4 or something less than that consume less gas than the one we're? Why are we consuming gas in the level we're doing? And then we pretend. Then we sit down and say, let's look for the next conference for pronouncement. I like what Uganda President Yoweri Museveni said the other day. And he's been very consistent about that. He wants to be able to have his own refinery for Uganda oil. And he need support, he need investment in order to do that. There was no refinery in Africa until Dangote came up with one in Nigeria. Nigeria is the leading producer of oil in Africa, but it sent its own oil somewhere else. That is how Singapore became a powerful economic giant, because Singapore figured out that why don't we encourage the Middle East to bring their oil here, and then we develop a giant refinery system. We sell them back the oil. So this is what is happening. When we take raw material like gold, diamond, we refine it and then resend it back to Africa to buy it. And we buy it at exorbitant amount of money. What is the result of that? And if we need to wake up, we need to talk less. We need to go on diet. We need to demonstrate. At least in Rwanda, they're beginning to do that. And you can see the difference on road construction or a hospital or school or what they're doing. But the rest are just talking.
Yeah.
When are we going to start acting in a positive way that change the life of people? That's where I'm coming from.
All right. Let's go on to Rwanda right now, where we have Rwanda ready for takeoff, and we know Britain has sent its first asylum seekers to Rwanda, and a voluntary scheme. The voluntary scheme is separate to a forced deportation program that Britain is about to embark on in the next few months, seeking to deter asylum seekers from crossing the English Channel in small boats to live in Britain. Under the voluntary scheme, the government has said it will pay asylum seekers up to £3,000, that is $3,747.60 each, to move to Rwanda to help clear the backlog of refugees who have arrived in the country in recent years. This new agreement is part of an existing government policy where asylum seekers are offered a financial assistance to leave Britain for their home country. But under this plan, people will get the money if they agree to live in Rwanda. A government spokesperson said they were able to send asylum seekers to Rwanda under its Migration and Economic Development Partnership. Tens of thousands of people have arrived in Britain in small boats since 2018, with many fleeing war or famine and traveling through Europe to Britain. In response, the government has spent 2 years trying to overcome legal and political opposition to the policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. Some 6,400 kilometers, that is 4,000 miles away, which it hopes will act as a deterrent. Parliament finally passed the divisive legislation last week, and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said he expected the first flight to take off in 10 to 12 weeks. Now, the recent clashes in El Fasher between the Sudanese Army, Allied Armed Movements, and their Rapid Support Forces, RSF, have displaced over 70,000 people, a North Darfur state government official revealed on Sunday. The UN warned last Friday of a potential humanitarian catastrophe if the RSF attack El Fasher, a city already crowded with war victims. Tensions have escalated with reports of increased RSF presence and gatherings by Arab tribal supporters around the city. According to the official speaking to Sudan Tribune, that is a publication there, more than 13,825 families have fled to the western areas of Golo, Shakra, Abu Dakis and Zamzam displacement camps. This brings the total displaced population to an estimated 73,803. And of course, we have reports and the media, that is press reports, allege ethnically motivated attacks by the RSF and allied militia on villages west of El Fasher, triggering the mass displacement. The Democratic Republic of Congo government has recalled all civil servants working for former President Joseph Kabila, effectively stripping him of his state security and support staff. In a statement, the director of ministry, that is Finance Ministry, this is Muleeme Kilolo, saying all those attached to Kabila's officials' residence, the Vatican site, should report to President Felix Tshisekedi's official residence, known by its French name, Palais de la Nation, that is State House, by end of April. Tshisekedi succeeded Kabila after the 2019 general elections. However, relations between Tshisekedi and Kabila have been on and off. In South Africa, marked 30 years since the end of apartheid and the birth of its democracy, with a ceremony in the capital's Saturday that included 21-gun salute and the waving of the nation's multicolored flag. But this Freedom Day holiday marking that day fell amid poignant backdrops. Analysts and polls predict that the waning popularity of the party, once led by Nelson Mandela, is likely to see it lose its parliamentary majority for the first time. In the week leading up to the anniversary, countless South Africans were asked what 30 years of freedom from apartheid meant to them. The dominant response was that while 1994 was a landmark moment, it's now overshadowed by the joblessness, violent crime, corruption, and near collapse of basic services like electricity and water that plagues South Africa in 2024. Right, we want just to hear from Dr. Kanenja. First of all, we can begin from Rwanda with, first of all, that particular breakthrough from the UK. They say finally Rwanda bill has passed. and it seems everyone is looking optimistic as far as Rwanda is concerned, even them receiving some of its refugees. Your sentiment? There's hue and cry all around that President Kagame should not go full steam ahead with this particular deal.
First of all, I think only President Kagame knows why he went into this deal. Whether it's because of his advertisement in the Premier League. Which team is it normally?
I can't remember.
Yes. But the statement coming from the UK government is that that this is supposed to serve as a deterrence, and that this policy is going to become even more effective the moment the first flight lands in Kigali. Why would they be saying that? Because in the assessment, people are going to think whatever they're being said is worse than where they are, and therefore they're going to be discouraged from coming. And I see it as a very racist kind of policy. Second, today as we speak, those refugees fleeing Ukraine, they're being housed and given homes and being entitled to virtually everything else in the UK and Western Europe. They are not part of those being sent to Kigali. And yet those ones who are running away, escaping equal harm or even worse, escaping genocide in places, escaping mass murder, ethnic cleansing, they're the ones who are being deported. And when you're going to look at them, I'm sure at the end of the day it's going to become very clear. Most of them, they're black and brown. They are not Anglo-Saxon. And at this moment in history, at the time when South Africa is marking 30 years of the end of apartheid, I see it as a manifestation and extension of global apartheid at the highest level. That if you're black and brown, you have no luck. But if you are right, if you're white, you are right and you have a right to be here. And that is unacceptable. It is not something that should. Secondly, when someone seeks a refugee status in a country, based on how refugee law has been practiced, you don't forcibly send them to another country against their wish. The UK, which has been a fairly liberal country that embraces all the fundamental aspects of liberal democracy and the free world, for them to be at the forefront of actually doing this, it really flies in the face of what the rest of us in the world who are liberal are trying to preach. I'm not so sure what's going to happen when tomorrow another country starts doing the same thing. Now, what will they say when Kenya decides to say, well, we're going to close down all the refugee camps, we're going to send them to a third country or a fourth country? What can you say to that? You see? And so it is indeed a very sad moment. It's a very racist, it's apartheid, it's uncalled for.
But we need to also interrogate what is really driving this particular notion, very nuanced and the subtleties around it, because there's a morbid fear around the great replacement. Would you want to comment on that as well? Because clouded with it is we have an invasion, we have immigration of people who are not like us, and we fear for us, the natives, if there are any natives in the first place.
First of all, yes, you're right. The so-called theory of great replacement. And UK, it needs to be understood, is a very close ally of Kenya, in many, many aspects, and they're friends to the Republic of Kenya. But UK should be the last country to fear about people coming in its territory. They occupy the entire world. Okay, the Commonwealth is a reflection of their presence everywhere else where they've been. And in my assessment, they should be the most welcoming country. Of course, you need to have certain limitations because of economic as well as social reasons. But at the same time, you should not be seen as a country that do not want even immigrants. For heaven's sake, Rishi Sunak's father, I think, was born somewhere in the North Rift. He's an immigrant. How about that? You should not be the one actually trying to drive these people. Remember, a lot of the world looks up to the UK as well as other advanced democracies. And so if you are the one doing exactly the opposite of what the world expects, it flies in the face of modernity and the concepts of democracy as well as human rights. You can't talk about human rights when you're forcing people. You give them what will be $3,000 dollars or pounds to you. Let's be honest, even here in Kenya. How are those people going to make a living? In a culture they don't understand, in a place they do not know,
I think the operative word has been pecuniary embarrassment, and this is it. This really comes to,
to the fore. That's really part of it, Dibal and colleagues. I think this is a sad, fairly sad moment for what was once a great British Empire. Which at some point was almost occupying 2/3 of the world, prompting World War II British Prime Minister to once say that the sun never sets in the British Empire, because when it was day in the other side of the Atlantic, in the other side of the Pacific, it was night. And it's even more interesting that as a son of a former student of Highway Secondary School here in Nairobi, whose father migrated to the UK, is actually the one coming up with such a fairly racist approach to issues. Why would Britain fear replacement when they have been part of that replacement? For example, in the United States, the Red Indians were replaced. The Aborigines in Australia, they were replaced mainly by migrants from Britain. If the Caucasians are going to be replaced in the UK, so be it. We will have a different probably country, which will be better like America is today, a land of immigrants, if you asked me. Is Sunak, Prime Minister Sunak, being pushed because of the situation that he's in politically, as a son of an immigrant? He wants to prove to his, the forces and powers that propped him into power in Britain, that I can act without mercy and without any consideration of what is going to happen to these guys. As Hassan said, no, not even the Browns. Predominantly, this will be mainly Africans.
Yes.
From different parts of the continent. Have we asked questions of Rwanda's capacity to integrate these new immigrants in ways that are not going to disadvantage them, in ways that are not going to open up new visitors for persecution again, which some of them were running away from the countries of origin where they came from. President Kagame's situation is fairly understandable if you look at perhaps what he wants to achieve. Understandable, but not acceptable.
Thank you.
Because I think he's looking for relevance, in the West, which is increasingly becoming impatient because of his human rights record and beginning to ask questions. I want to believe that President Kagame wants to redeem his image by using these poor refugees as a way of buying respect one more time in London. If that is the case, that would be very unfortunate for him.
Thank you.
But let it be known that this is Britain, I think, in my view, at its lowest.
All right. And of course, we can say this is part of the Commonwealth, because Rwanda is not part really of the Commonwealth. Or is it part of the Commonwealth right now? It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Now.
Right now. Okay.
Yes.
But not by the virtue of what Commonwealth should have been.
Rwanda is not Anglophone.
It's not Anglo. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You know, if
But how do
probably
they
were being brought to Nairobi, somebody will say, well, at least English is a common language.
Indeed.
But the common language in Rwanda, particularly among the everyday people, is French.
Right, let's hear from
the Kinyarwanda.
Let us hear from Professor Midamba, then we give our headline thoughts.
Well, let us look at the fundamental of the trend in the world. What's going on?
No, let's not look at the fundamental because of time.
It is very important.
I don't want to cut you short because also, because of time.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Okay, then let me summarize. By the year 2050, 1 out of every person in the world will be a black person. Projected. By the year 2050, okay, 1 out of every 4 person.
Oh, 1 over, okay.
Out of every 4 person in the world will be a black person. The issue in America today...
This is according to what study, Prof?
Oh, there's several studies. I can cite several studies that talk about that. I teach it about. What I'm talking about is what I teach my graduate students. Several studies, some all demographic. By the year 2050, that is projection. Now, so let's look at United States, the issues that's happening. Barack Obama became president of the United States, immigrant, a black person from Africa. And then the Trump movement began in a very different way to where it is right now. Nigeria, go back to where you come from, using some really uncultured language to go back to Africa. This is the wave that Trump is riding on, okay? So now, UK is very similar, the same. These people are coming, they are not like us. Sunak is now the prime minister. Where did he come from? And the next time, it's going to be a black person being prime minister of the UK. It's a crisis underneath that is bubbling, the bulb. And Paul Kagame is just falling on it, you know, uncharacteristic of Paul Kagame. He's just reinforcing their procedures, the regulation that guide the refugees. So my point is, it is time we take care of our own people. The refugees from Sudan who come to Kenya can decide to settle in Kenya and be Kenya. The one who goes to Africa need to take care of his own refugees, so they don't go to Europe and they don't go anywhere else.
Indeed. And that really brings us back to that topic of the Africa Summit, Heads Summit that we had. Of course, with the appeal in hand, at the end of the day, this is how it spans out to be. But let's just get your headline thoughts, Dr. Kanenja. 30 seconds.
I think the event that is taking place at Columbia University, it is very telling and reminiscent of the movement against apartheid, and I think is the beginning of a movement against the apartheid that is actually going on in the Middle East, especially against Palestinians. And time has come, and the injustice must end.
Thank you. Dr. 30 seconds.
The floods, the water, can we begin thinking about how to save this water? Because the dry season will be equally bad in a few months. Can we do something either as a government or counties to save this water?
Right, thank you. Bidamba.
6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, a genocide. 800 million Rwandese died, Holocaust. It is time that Bibi Netanyahu be tried at The Hague for creating Holocaust against Palestine.
All right, let's leave it at that. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I want to appreciate you coming through this morning. The 1st of May, being a Labor Day, at least you've also showcase that at least you can labor for this country. I really do appreciate that sacrifice this morning and your input as well. We shall be looking at other raft of issues, of course, that are emerging right now that has been raised on the table, looking at Israel with Hamas as well. That will be also much later next week. But for today, I want to thank you so much for coming through. Also on behalf of Professor Peter Kagwanja that could not make it because of landslides in Murang'a. His family, relatives have been affected by that. This is so near to us as well, but we are standing in solidarity with him as well. Thank you so much for your valid company. Don't go away. Much later, we shall be covering a wall-to-wall, wire-to-wire live coverage from Uhuru Gardens, where the Labor Day celebration will be there. Thank you very much for